Welcome back to the Workbench After Hours podcast. My name is Keith, and I'm your host. This is where we talk about the firearms community, shop talk, and everyday life experiences. Welcome back, guys. This is the Workbench After Hours podcast, episode 2, and today we have Hunter here with us. He's a new gun owner, and this episode is going to be geared towards the new gun owners. He's got some questions, and we figured that other people might have the same questions, but they feel silly asking those. So he's going to go through a list of questions that he has, and I'll answer those as best as I can and kind of help you guys. Kind of get in the guns and stuff like that. So Hunter, here, if you want to kind of tell us your background on guns or where you're at so far.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, my name's Hunter. I guess if you really break down to when I first got a gun, I inherited a shotgun from my grandpa, and it's an Ithaca 12 gauge, but it's like a lever action, break apart shotgun, whatever. I only got to shoot it like one time. But then when I was in high school, about 17, 18 years old, I bought a hunting shotgun from a buddy of mine, and I actually got to go shoot skeet with that a couple times. Kind of got into it, but then, college happened. I kind of got out of it. I've always been interested in guns, but I kind of fell out for a little bit. And I always wanted a pistol, and I eventually bought my first pistol from Keith, a Glock 17 Gen 3. And so ever since I bought that, I bombard him with questions constantly. And so I thought that maybe this would be a good, as new gun owners, I'm sure people have a lot of questions. And so I thought this would be a good platform to ask some of these questions and have someone who knows what they're actually talking about kind of break down what those questions are and give you the best answers for them. So
yeah, that's cool. And yeah, we do have the YouTube channel that we have, and we kind of do gun breakdown videos and reviews, but that's usually geared towards a specific gun and not like just guns in general, or like the basic safety stuff, which we might do a separate video on and stuff like that. But yeah, were you intimidated at all when you first shot a gun for the first time? Because I feel like a lot of people are intimidated. I know I was when the first time I went and shot a gun at a gun range. I had no idea what I was doing, and of course the guy that was teaching me brought me into the gun range, didn't tell me anything about it until we actually started shooting. And you have the earring protection on and everything, and so I can't hear him. He's yelling. We're yelling back and forth, and I'm like, okay, I think I can load a magazine, but it probably took me 3 times before I could actually load a magazine.
We actually got it put together.
I feel stupid now because I'm like, that's like so simple. But if you've never actually handled bullets before, ammo, and loaded them to a magazine, I mean, you really don't know which direction they go or stuff like that. And so I was super intimidated and stuff like that. So I didn't know if you.
Yeah, absolutely. When I got that first shotgun from my grandpa, it's just you can put one shell in at a time, and essentially just said whether the gun's loaded or not, just make sure you're not pointing it at anybody. And but with that gun, it was nice because you had to put one physical shell in. You never knew if the chamber was empty or not because, there was one shell going in at a time. And then when I got that second shotgun, that was a pump shotgun. I can't remember what it's called. Maybe the plug or something like that out so it could fit more rounds in it. So that's when it got a little more intimidating because you can easily lose count. I think it held 7 rounds. You can easily lose count, how many shells you have in there or whatnot. And so that part definitely could be intimidating. And then I bought my Glock 17 from Keith probably about almost a year ago, but I haven't shot it yet. So that's the one thing that I'm really intimidated to go shoot is the actual handgun because it feels like it's a different animal. And so yeah, that's the one thing that I am intimidated to go through.
And handguns are actually pretty hard to shoot, unless you have the right grip and stance, and you have the perfect form. They're hard to shoot and shoot accurately. Whereas with a rifle, you could shoulder it and you have more control over it versus a handgun. So it's when people shoot a handgun for the first time, and you see especially women, don't hold it right, and so then they lose control, so they get big kickbacks and stuff like that. And I see it all the time when someone's shooting a gun and they don't hold it right, so it basically stovetops or not stovetops, but the round kicks up, and then instead of ejecting out to the side because they limp wrist it, it either comes back and hits them in the head, or I've seen girls where it actually goes down their shirt, and then they freak out, but then they have a loaded gun in their hand. It's like,
Mm,
whoa, okay,
hmm.
all right, so you gotta,
There's too much going on all of a sudden.
yeah, so it's like you gotta learn the perfect form first, and just take your time, really. But he hasn't we haven't I haven't taken him just because of COVID and the ammo shortage,
'Cause,
and
yeah, it's hard to find ammo for a long time.
yeah, yeah, it's getting better. I went to Academy and Shields nearby us, and the Cabela's, and they actually have ammo, 9 millimeter. It's a little more expensive than it should be, but still not as bad as it has been. But so yeah, I mean, what kind of questions you have?
Well, the one thing I wanted to bring back really quick is when I bought the Glock 17 from Keith. I'm married, and my wife had a bunch of questions about it. Am I going to be able to use it? All this stuff, blah blah blah. And so Keith had a really um, cool way for her to be able to actually pull the slide back. She holds the slide and punches with her right hand versus trying to pull the slide back with her left hand. But when we first got the gun, the whole thing for her was, can we both use it, or is this just going to be for you? And I said, no, we got it for both of us. We're both going to be able to use it if need be. But when Keith was talking about girls, shooting and not really knowing what's going on. So as I'm learning to shoot the gun, I think it'd be a great opportunity for my wife to come as well and figure out how to shoot the gun as well.
And I only figured that out because my wife was terrified of guns when we first started dating, and obviously with me having a gun business, and that's a big hobby of mine, she wanted to get more comfortable with it, so she actually took a women's only gun class at the local range. It's a 2-day course, and it's taught by women for women. And so they basically teach you handgun safety first, so because obviously they're all scared of guns and don't know how to handle them, so they teach them the gun safety first and how to properly handle them. And one of the things that they taught them was, for men, it's easy to rack a slide, no problem, just hold it, take your left hand or vice versa, and just rack the slide back.
Mm-hmm.
Women don't have the muscle strength that we do to do that.
Strength to do it.
Yeah, so they taught my wife a good thing for them is to hold the frame. So if you're right-handed, hold the frame, and then take your left hand, hold the slide, and then punch the frame forward. So instead of racking the slide back, you hold the slide in place and then just punch the frame forward, and that'll kind of rack it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how my wife does it, and tells other women to do it, and it works. It works just fine.
Yeah, and that was one of the first things that you showed me when I told you that my wife had some questions about the gun or whatever, and then I put it in her hands and let her run it through once, and she's like, "Oh, okay, yes, I can do this. I can't pull it back myself if I'm trying to pull against the slide, but if I grip lock down and punch through, I can definitely get that rounded chamber." So I thought that was a really cool part too. But so as a new gun owner, the main reason I wanted a pistol was home defense. And so, I've got this laundry list of questions. We've kind of talked about them before, but we kind of save them for the podcast. But I guess the first question that I wanted to ask was, in your opinion, when I'm buying ammo for home defense, what, I have a 9 millimeter, but let's just talk in terms of pistol rounds. What type of round would you recommend for home defense?
So usually if you're for a pistol, you want it's what's called a jacketed hollow point. So a hollow point round. And that's basically where it's hollow in the center, and then they do these cuts to where when it hits the subject, it fragments and breaks apart, and that's when it does a lot of tissue damage and also slows down the bullet. Like the practice rounds that you shoot at the range are a full metal jacket. It's just a full ball ammo, no, hollow point or anything. And those aren't good for self-defense because they'll just travel through whatever and not really break apart. Whereas the hollow point rounds to use for self-defense, they're meant to break apart once it hits, like a soft tissue or something,
Mm.
and it'll fragment inside and do more damage and also kind of help prevent from over penetration.
Okay.
So, and then there's so many different kinds out there, so many different brands, and really what you need to do is get a couple different ones and see what your gun likes. Some guns are like finicky on the type of self-defense ammo that they use. So Glocks, I mean, they'll shoot anything, but when they release a new gun, sometimes they do have issues, or depending on what you're shooting, might not like the ammo. It might have malfunction or something. So you definitely want to test whatever self-defense ammo you're going to be shooting,
Okay.
and then that way, because they're usually a heavier bullet, so you'll see that um, the bullet weight on them is heavier, so there's a different number. So it's referred to like the bullet grain. So on the
Mm.
box, so if you see a box of 9mm, it'll say FMJ 115 GR or GR. That means it's the full metal jacket, which is for the target practice
Mhm.
stuff,
Mhm.
and then the 115 is the weight of the bullet, and so that's just how heavy it is. And so usually on these self-defense rounds, that number will be higher because it's a heavier bullet. Usually, I think the most common is like 124 grain in these self-defense, and I think it goes up a little bit more, but pretty common the 124 grain.
Okay. Yeah, and that's awesome because that was going to be my next question. Because I've seen grain, on boxes. The couple times I've bought ammo from my 9mm, and I always see that grain on there. I'm like, what the heck does grain
Right.
mean?
When I first started getting into guns, I'm like, does that mean like how much powder's in there, or
Mm-hmm.
what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
But no, it's just it has to do with just the bullet itself. Because you have with the ammo, you have the casing, and then inside the casing is the gunpowder, and then you have the bullet that seats in there. So the actual bullet and the projectile that comes out of the casing when you shoot it, that's what it's measuring, is the weight of that actual
That's what
bullet.
grain's referring to.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And then the other question that I was thinking about is, I got to shoot my shotgun a couple times, and Keith, little backstory, that first one that I bought, I ended up buying a different shotgun from him, Mossberg 500 for home defense. But the original one I had, I'm not even sure what the brand was, but it was a big hunting shotgun,
I
and
think it was a Stoger. It was an off-brand Benelli. I
yeah,
think it was Stoger.
yeah, and it had what, 28,
28-inch barrel.
28 barrel, which he told me, he's like, what are you gonna do? Try and turn the corner on somebody with that and have that long barrel? He's like, you're not gonna hit. So,
Yeah.
anyways, I ended up having him sell that for me, and I got his Benelli 500 from him. But I had shot that gun a couple times, and I knew nothing about cleaning it, and so when he went to clean it before he sold it, he had to put a bunch of work into it. And so my next big question was, what are some materials that I need to buy right off the bat for after I shoot a gun to help clean, and then like what's kind of just the basics of when you are breaking down a gun and cleaning it, like how does that go?
Right. And so, and depending on if you're cleaning a shotgun, rifle, or pistol, the cool thing is different companies make cleaning kits for pistols, shotguns, or rifles that have the certain tools that you would need. But, for me, it's easier to just buy stuff separate just because I'm picky on the type of gun cleaners I use and what I use. But first thing you want to do is obviously read your manual because it'll walk you through how to clean it. But usually, if you go to like Academy, Cabela's, or any sporting goods store that sells guns, they'll have all sorts of different gun cleaners. They're all pretty much the same.
Hmm.
It's personal preference, really. I personally like Ballistol. Um, I've You can use it on guns and a bunch of other stuff, but it's a cleaner and lubricator.
Okay.
So I've never had issues with it, and it's awesome.
Is that big banner you have down in the garage?
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
I'm a dealer with them, but I do carry the product because I like it. So I'm
Hmm.
not usually don't carry a product I don't like. So, but yeah, I mean they have Rem Oil, Hoppies, which is actually local here to Kansas City. So whatever you use, you want to get a gun cleaner and then a lubricant. But again, with Ballast Salt, it's both. so you don't
It's
have to.
combined, so you don't have to worry about it too much.
Yeah, so what you do, and we have on our Boomstick Tactical LLC YouTube channel, we have a bunch of um, field trip videos. So when you refer to field tripping a gun, it's taking it apart to clean it and
Okay.
then putting it back together. I think we're going to be doing some more videos on actually getting into the cleaning instead of just the breakdown. But I always recommend people, either watch YouTube, you'll find a bunch of videos on it, or also read your manual. It'll also walk you through it. And then in the manual, it'll show you where to lubricate the gun, because it's different, depending on a pistol, rifle, shotgun, how much lube you use and stuff like that. But the
It's okay.
right, no big deal. Just dropping phones. His wife called, so he had to drop the phone.
Get that thing on the floor.
Right. No, and then like with cleaning barrels, like Glock pistols come with this little tool that you put these patches you can run through, which are okay. They do an okay job. I prefer bore snakes, and those are they look like ropes, but they have like a thick brush on the end. And then what I usually typically do is, whether it's a shotgun, pistol, or rifle, I'll spray the gun cleaner, so ballistol, in the barrel, let that soak for a while, and then I'll take the gun snake or a bore snake and run it through several times, and
So
it
when you say
clears
they
out all
look
the
like
debris.
snakes, is it like a wire cleaner type of looking thing, or
It
how
looks
would you explain
it
it?
looks like a rope, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like, and it's the thickness depends on the caliber of gun you're cleaning. So with the shotgun, it's a big thick one versus a AR. It's a lot smaller.
Okay.
So it'll fit through the diameter of your gun, and I think that works better than the cleaning rods and patches, because there's more contact points, and it just, I feel like it does a better job getting all the crud out of the barrel.
Creates a lot more friction as it's coming through.
Yeah, and if like you're not going to, shoot your gun for a while, you want to run a light coat of oil through the barrel. So that's when the patch comes in handy. So you'll have like a long rod for, a rifle, or the short rod that the Glock comes with. Just put a patch on there, lightly oil it, and just run it through real quick. And then it just gets a light coat of oil in there.
So if you're going to store your gun for a while, you want to do that.
Yeah, because guns will rust. Most of the time, especially if there's a lot of guns have bluing or a finish, and if they're rubbed off, or the bare metal showing, those can, in the wrong condition, start to rust. I know one of my family members had a Taurus revolver that was blued, but you handle it and you get all the oil off your hands and stuff like that, and then they put it away forever. And if you don't store it in a cool, dry place that doesn't have, has low humidity, it'll start to surface rust.
Okay.
And it happens. You're going to get surface rust on your gun. So if you see a little bit of rust, it's not a big deal, unless it starts to pit. But usually it's surface rust, and you can clean it off. And what I do if I see any surface rust is take that ballistol, spray it on that area, and use a quadruple aught steel wool, and just lightly rub that, and it'll get the surface rust off. Of there.
And if you, say similar situation, but you have like a nice finish to your gun, or a nice paint job or something on it, is that something that you have to worry about very much? And if you do, would you still want to use that light steel wool to get the rust off, or is there a different process you would go through?
You can, because usually where it's going to rust is where the finishes come off anyway.
Okay.
But that quadruple aught is so fine, it's not going to mess with your finish or anything, as long as you don't want to sit there and scrub it really hard or anything.
Sure.
But adding that ballistol, the cleaner and lubricant, kind of helps protect that as well. It's just scraping off that little bit of surface rust, and then after you do that, just take some clean cloths and kind of wipe everything off, and it comes out pretty clean.
And then, like, this kind of bit of a sidebar, but ever since you've never taken me out to go shoot my Glock 17 since I've had it, I can't help myself. I go pull it out and, pull the slide back and kind of jack with it a little bit or whatever. But then I always just set it back in the case and put it back in. Do I need to be putting some sort of oil or something on top of it to help with that surface rust, or what's your opinion on that?
So what I do is they make these cloths that have a light coat of like oil on it. And after I handle the gun, especially that has like a blued finish or anything like that where it could rust, just wipe it down with that. So after you handle it, you're getting ready to put it away, wipe it down with that light coat. It's got that light coat of oil on it, and it'll keep it from rusting. And then you just put it up, and then when you're ready to shoot it, just kind of wipe that off with a
Okay.
clean rag, and then you're good to go.
Okay.
So like I have a bunch of old curio rifles that I have that I don't shoot. I just collect them. So I'll rub those down in oil and stuff, and so that way, because when they're sitting in the crate I have them stored in, they're not gonna the
Mm.
rust. And I usually try and control the humidity, especially like with a gun safe. If you do use a gun safe, you want to have uh, it's called a dry rod, and it just helps control the humidity,
Okay.
because that's what really is gonna do damage to your gun is the humidity. So
Mm.
here in the Midwest,
Mm.
in the summers it gets pretty humid, so that's really what causes the rust.
Okay. And then, I mean, I obviously know what a blued finish means, but just for our listeners, can you explain what that means,
Yeah,
just so they can know as well?
it's called blue. It's just a type of finish that goes over like a bare metal, and it's called blue, but it almost looks black,
Mm.
and it's kind of got a shiny finish to it. And so if it looks black, it's got a little bit of a shine to it. It's usually blued, and it'll say it's blued. There's also a Parkerized finish, and I think that's what's on your Mossberg that you bought from me. It's more of a duller gray color,
Okay.
and it seems it's dull and it's not as shiny. That's a
Mm.
Parkerized finish, and that's a good finish. It just tends to like show wear on it more than like a blued finish. And they make these kits where you can add fix the bluing if it starts coming off. But yeah, that's really the two main finishes you're gonna see is Parkerized
Mm.
or blued, and then obviously you'll have stainless steel guns, stuff like that. And then you got special Cerakoted guns where people do a special Cerakote, or plastic. It's not hydro dipping, I think it is.
Okay.
People hydro dip for different designs on their guns and stuff like that.
Okay. And then here's a question that I probably should have asked you earlier when we were talking about um, home defense rounds and grain and all that stuff. But what's the difference between, like, say I'm going to buy rounds? What's the difference between a brass case round versus a steel case round?
So yeah, that's a good thing to know, because the brass case is obviously it's brass.
Mm.
So it's got that like I don't know, yellow finish to it.
Mm.
And then the steel casing is made out of steel, and it's that like it's got like a lubrication on it or whatever. So the brass case is usually more expensive, but usually what you want to use, because the steel case is as appealing because it's cheap, but it's not going to be as accurate. So like when I bought some steel case ammo for my AR, I went and shot it at the gun range, and the groupings were all over the place. And then I switched to brass case, and there were a lot tighter groupings.
Okay.
So just something about the casings and stuff is it's not as accurate. It Some people say it's a little bit harder on your gun. Yes and no, it just depends. But
Okay.
it's if you really want to go for accuracy, you just want to make sure you have a brass case.
So would you say, in your professional opinion, then, is it better to run a brass case through the magazine versus a steel case?
Yeah, I mean, you could run either or.
Yeah.
It's just you're gonna get better results with the brass case.
Okay. Okay. Um, One of the other questions that I had was, um, and it's a weird question to kind of put you on the spot with, because there's probably thousands of answers out there. But if you were to give a your personal professional recommendation on a pistol, a shotgun, and a rifle, what would be the first three that you'd recommend a new gun owner to go out and get?
Well, well, first I would, as a business owner with firearms, I would love to sell you a bunch of guns, but I usually tell people, especially like first time gun buy, like if you've never shot a gun and are trying to figure out what you want, go. A lot of gun ranges will let you rent guns and try them out before
Mm.
you buy them.
Mhm.
And I always recommend people do that, because and I've made the mistake where I bought a gun. I'm like, oh, that's cool. It's really small. I'm going to be able to conceal it. It's like a pocket gun or whatever. and it feels good when you're not shooting it, but when you actually shoot it, it kicks. It just doesn't feel good. So I've learned the hard way. It's best to try that gun out first before you buy it. Otherwise, you're stuck, um, with a gun you don't like. Because that's what I hate is like with somebody that's never had a gun before, and so they buy one that's not good for what their need is, and they don't like the way that gun shoots, then they automatically don't like shooting guns because they had a bad experience with that wrong handgun or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, but generally, so like the most popular handgun is most likely the Glock 19.
Mm-hmm.
Glocks are a good brand. They're like the AKs of pistols. They're they're tanks. They run. They're simple. A lot of people think they're ugly because they don't have a bunch of stuff on them, but they're simple, easy to take apart. The cool thing is, like, if there was a shortage on anything, they're so popular that you're always gonna be able to find parts for them.
Mm-hmm.
So like with the Glock 19, that thing's been around forever. It's the perfect kind of fit between a full size gun but you can still carry it.
Mm-hmm.
And with it being a double stack gun, it's a little thicker, so you're able to get a little bit bigger grip on it,
And
better
really
grip on it.
quick, go through what double stack is versus single stack.
So typically a double stack gun is going to be thicker than a single stack. So it's just how the rounds stack up in the magazine. So a single stack is they're just one on top of the other, and usually it holds like a 1911 is a single stack, and it holds usually 7 to 8 rounds. Whereas a double stack, they kind of alter and they're thicker. So you'll see on the magazine, there's two sides where they load to. That's a double stack. So you get more rounds with the double stack, but they're usually thicker than the single stack
So
guns.
then it's a fatter feeling in your
Yeah,
hand.
yeah.
Okay.
And the fatter feeling is, I almost think a lot of people's like, well, it's fatter. I'm not gonna be able to conceal it as well or whatever. But honestly, you're gonna get a better grip and have better control over that than a smaller, slimmer frame.
Okay.
The most thing I hear people talk about, especially with a guy brings in his girlfriend or wife, and she's looking for her first gun, and she's like, I want something small. Like, I want to get the smallest gun possible. I'm like, you think that, like, ideally, you think you want to get the smallest gun, it'd be easy to shoot, but the smaller the gun, the harder it is to shoot because you have less area for you to grip the gun, and it's just going to be snappier and just a lot harder to shoot. And then the smaller the guns, you can't get the distance on them as a full size gun.
Mm-hmm. And if you're off just even slightly by a little bit more angle, it's just gonna compound.
Oh yeah,
left or right, up or down, or whatever the case may be.
and especially if you're a new shooter too, and you don't have a good grip or shooting form, you're going to be all over the place with the smaller gun just because you don't have the controllability, and they're a lot harder to control.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, you give that same person a full size gun, they're going to have better grouping and control over that gun than the smaller one. Even I struggle with that sometimes with the smaller, like Glock 43 I have. I'm definitely not as accurate versus my full size Glock 21.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a noticeable difference. And a lot of people, like, when you're shooting, you're expecting that recoil, so you tend to flinch, and then that's where you tend to flinch before, and then you're just off.
Okay. And then that brings me to my next point. Getting used to that flinch. Obviously, if you do have a firearm, you need to have several hours of practice with it, so you know exactly how it fires and you're really comfortable with it. So the next thing I wanted to get into is one shooting range etiquette. When you're at a shooting range, what's the etiquette? It can be. I've never been, but I can only imagine it's intimidating because there's lots of people there with their guns out. You don't want to look like an idiot, especially if you don't know what you're doing. And so can you kind of go over that a little bit?
Yeah, and hopefully you're going with somebody that's been before, and they can show you. But obviously, you always, and this is the most basic gun rule, you always want to treat your gun as if it's loaded. So most gun ranges won't let you bring a gun in unless it's in a case if you're carrying a gun in. If you can conceal carry in your state, that's fine. You just have to keep it on your belt or your holster until you get in. But most people bring in, bags, range bags and stuff like that. So, just follow the basic handgun safety. Don't point at anything you're not willing to shoot. It's loaded at all times. Depending on the gun range, they're going to have the rules posted. Some of them, especially a lot of the outdoor ranges, for some reason make you go through a training course with their safety rules before you can actually shoot. But just, you don't want to be that guy that you see a video on screwing something up and like getting shot or shooting somebody else. You
Right,
don't want to be
right.
that guy. So just be careful. Always, even if, like you think you're out or can't, or you're passing the gun on, just always keep it pointed down range. Because you never know. You might think you're out, but if your gun might not be empty, and then if you move it around, you can accidentally shoot somebody. Or I've seen a lot of videos of just people doing stupid stuff.
Stupid stuff with
And
their
yeah, and
own.
it's like, you don't know, either you don't know, or you're just that naive. It's
Mhm.
crazy. But it's just, and then be respectful up there. Just, if you got a really loud gun, don't sit there and like just shoot it a bunch of times, because like, especially indoors, like where we're at, you can shoot rifles, pistols, or shotguns in any bay. Some of them will separate where you shoot pistols, and then they'll have a separate area for rifles and shotguns,
Mhm.
just because they're a lot louder.
Mhm.
And there's especially with an AR, there's a lot of concussion that comes off of those. So if you're in the next bay shooting, and somebody's shooting a big caliber rifle, man, you're going to be ringing their bell. And I was that idiot. I actually bought an AK pistol when I was getting in the guns at first. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Well, I
Mhm.
brought it in there and shot it a couple times. It sounded like a freaking cannon going off.
Mhm.
And not only did I get everybody's attention in the gun range, but everybody out in the front area was like looking in, like,
Turn
what
around
the
like, going,
hell?
what the hell's
Because not only
happening?
was there this loud boom, I mean, you have this big flash, and it's
Mhm.
like, yeah, I mean, should I have shot that indoors? Probably not.
Mhm.
So just, be aware of who's around you, and just follow the rules that they have. And some gun ranges are specific on the type of ammo that they'll let you shoot.
Mhm.
Some don't even allow the steel cased ammo.
Mhm.
Um, so it just kind of go in there, and if you have any questions, I mean, everybody there is, um,
Typically pretty friendly.
yeah, especially the one by us. It's pretty cool. It's owned by an old retired, I think, a police officer, and everybody that works there is ex-military, police, or anything like that. There are certain gun ranges where you still have the old grumpy old men running it,
Mhm.
and stuff like that. That can be intimidating, but usually, if you don't know what you're doing, just ask. And most of them have range officers, so if you're obviously doing something wrong, they'll come tell you and show you how. So
Okay. And then this leads me into my next question. I mean, your deaf ass has tinnitus.
yeah,
You can hardly hear anything. But, obviously to prevent that, is there a specific brand or a specific type of hearing protection that you would recommend wearing, whether you're in a range or shooting in a field or whatever? But is there a certain type of hearing protection that you feel is, adequate?
yeah. That there's two different types. There's like the over ear ones, kind of like the headphones we're wearing now. The over the ear ones.
Mm-hmm.
They have basic ones, but then they also have electronic ones to where they have a mic and speaker. So that way, if somebody's speaking to you, you can actually hear them, and it's droning draining out the loud booms from the gun. So those are cool. If you They're a little more expensive, but I would recommend those, especially for people that are new and need to talk to whoever's with them. The electronic earmuffs will come in handy because you can actually hear each other talking. It's like you're talking through mics and speakers built in.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you just have the cheap ones that go over your head without that, we're gonna be yelling at each other and
So
getting frustrated.
it's still eliminating the loud percussion, but you're
Yep.
still able to hear each other
Yeah, the
through that.
electronic ones, yeah.
Okay.
And then they also have the ones that you stick in your ear, like the foam ones.
Mm-hmm.
Those are okay. I made the mistake of using some cheap ones and going in the indoor range for a long period of time. And when I took them out, man, my hearing was jacked up. So what I typically do is I double up. I put in the foam ones
Mm-hmm.
that you get, and then put the over the ear ones,
Okay.
just because I've jacked up my hearing, so I
Oh,
got really
I
bad
know.
tinnitus.
I know.
So
He'll be mowing the lawn next to me, and I'm like screaming his name.
yeah.
He has to turn off the lawnmower and go, "Huh? Were you talking to me?"
Yeah, yeah.
It's
So I should have taken care of my hearing when I was younger, around all the loud saws and crap we were doing. And I was dumb and lit off or shot off a 22 round without any hearing protection, pretty close to my ear. And yeah, that'll make you lose some permanent hearing.
hearing from there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so then something else I was going to ask, but at this point it might seem a little tedious because I feel like when you talked about when I asked, you know, what's the what you would recommend for a first pistol, shotgun, or whatever, you kind of said you need to try some out and feel what fits right to you.
right.
But when you're buying a specific gun, I mean, I've known you for long enough now where I know you go quality over quantity anytime. Is is the is firearms and just the entire industry in general, does that fall in that category where you really do get what you pay for? If you're willing to spend the extra money, you're going to get something that lasts forever? Or is it kind of one of those things where it just has the name on it, so it's a name brand, so that's why they get to charge so much more, but there might be a cheaper gun that performs just as well, but it just doesn't have the name brand recognition, and so that's why they charge it, or that's why it's so much cheaper.
It's a little bit of both. Like with anything, you are most likely going to get what you pay for.
Hmm.
Um, the lower, cheaper guns are going to have cheaper parts, so that like the more say like plastic parts or something like that. Um, so there are certain brands where, especially high points are horrible. They're super cheap. You could get one for like under $100. It's a pistol, but they are so heavy. They're like freaking paperweights. They're so heavy, and just the balance of them is
Might as be
ridiculous.
might as well be carrying a stapler around in your hand.
Right.
And
It. So yeah, with that stuff, I mean, you get what you pay for. But again, then you can have stuff to where you're really also buying the brand, especially
Mhm.
But if you have the money and want to buy that stuff,
Mhm.
yeah, because I used to be more of buy as many guns as I can
Mhm.
and go kind of cheaper. But the more I've gotten into guns and more experience, I do like the quality over quantity, because honestly, I could have all the guns in the world, but I'm only gonna be able to shoot so many at a
Mhm.
time. So
Mhm.
I'd rather have a good, you know,
A really nice gun.
a rifle with everything I want on it, good parts and stuff like that, versus
Mhm.
a bunch of cheap ones. Um,
Sure,
and same thing
sure.
with handguns. I've actually kind of reduced my collection to the ones I know I like and gonna keep, versus I used to have a lot more guns, but I'm like, okay, do I really need these? I don't shoot them that
Mhm.
much, but I know I like these. These are ones I tend to go towards anyway. So then I, sell the ones I don't use and put that towards like a better rifle or shotgun or
Yeah.
whatever.
Well, because my father-in-law is a huge SIG guy, and when I first talked to you about buying a handgun, I was so into getting a SIG, and you quickly talked me out of it going with Glock. I know it's one of the manufacturers that you work well with, but um, you definitely convinced me to go with the Glock after showing me, the customizability of them and just what they can really do. And so um, that's always a question that I don't know much about guns, but because I know you, people think I know a bunch about guns, so they're always asking me questions, and so I always
No,
kind of have to wing my way through it. But
right.
I've heard you say 100 times. Quality over quantity, so that's kind of just how I describe things to people.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with Sig. I mean, they're one of the main brands. You got Sig, Smith and Wesson, Glock, Springfield are really the top manufacturers of pistols and stuff. But I just gravitate more towards Glocks just because they're easier.
Mm.
I think with the Sigs, I feel like they're more have a higher basically a bore axis. So for me, it was a little bit harder to shoot. So you being a new gun owner and knowing that we're not gonna be able to shoot for a while. I'm like, just Glock. If you
Mm,
start with a Glock, generally you're gonna like it, and then you can, if you want to try
pretty
SIGs
much
down the
go
road.
from there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's more personal preference, but I know from my experience, and you're pretty much just like me. And that's kind of, we got a lot in common. So that's why I recommended the Glock to you.
Mm.
Um, and at the time, I think I don't even think I could have gotten a 19, just because that when you bought them when you bought it last year, guns were so hard to get.
Yeah, it
So I'm like, I
was.
got a Glock 17. You should just buy this.
I think it was in like March last year, and it was the point where you couldn't find anything at the
Yeah,
time. And
and the 17 is it's the full size gun. So, and wanted it primarily for home defense.
hmm
So for home defense, you want a larger gun, so you have more controllability of it. So that's why I would probably, lead you more towards the 19 had we got them. So that way, if you wanted to carry, you could.
hmm
But at the time, you're just, home defense. I'm like, all right,
and I will say, it's one of those guns where when you put it in my hand and I held it and messed around with it, you know, pulled the slide back a bunch of times, released the magazine, released the slide, kind of went through it a couple times. I was like, this gun actually does feel really good in my hand. Now, I still haven't shot it yet, so I'm not positive how it's actually going
yeah,
to end up
you may hate
feeling.
it, and I'll be like, ah, dang.
But I've held a couple of my father-in-law's SIGs, and they just don't quite feel the same. So I am interested to see when I finally get to go shoot it, how it's going to feel. But
I swear it'll be
I've got
soon.
I've got pretty good confidence that it's gonna be a great
Well,
gun.
now that we can actually find ammo, we just have to find the time to go up there and do
Yeah.
it. It's
And we act like it's so hard. We live directly next door to each other. It'd be so easy as for us to
right.
just hop up the street.
Well, it stinks. Like, this is supposed to be like my day job, my slow time of the year, but now we're super busy, so it's like crap. Then you got the holidays and everything, and it's like,
Nothing like 60-mile-an-hour winds on a 70 degree day in December.
right, yeah,
Crazy.
that sucks. But yeah, we'll get out there, and might, well, because with the YouTube channel, might get a couple shots of you doing that for,
hmm
a video for new gun owners that we
hmm
do, or something like that. Just, and then we'll do like, again, like with the YouTube channel, we do a lot of, obviously, field trips right now, but we'll do a lot of gun cleaning once we actually get our guns dirty.
hmm
Because a lot of people, obviously, they buy a gun and they shoot it, and they're like, well, crap, how do I, clean it? Your manual tells you stuff, but they're not the best.
And it's so much easier to see someone visually break
Right.
it down and explain to you step by step. This is how you should
Yeah.
do, and if you can see everything.
Because
And
if you've ever put something together from IKEA, I feel like that's how most manuals are. It's like, okay, yeah, it made sense to whoever was writing this, but it does not
hmm
make sense to me. And
hmm
then,
And
like,
that actually made sense the first time I read it, but then when I looked at what I actually had to deal with, no idea what I'm doing
right.
all of a sudden.
Well, then you do it and you kind of mess up, and you're like, what the heck? And then, that way I'm more of would rather watch something on YouTube
hmm
and watch somebody do it a
And I feel
few
like that's how
times.
most people are too. And okay, so the last thing I wanted to ask you, I actually wanted to ask you a couple more questions about ARs and their actual build, because I've actually helped Keith at a gun show or two, and he's got people coming up buying uppers, lowers, all this stuff for the ARs, and it's pretty much it's almost like they're speaking Spanish to me. Like, I kind of get it, but I don't really get it. And I think we could probably save that for another podcast. But one of the things I really wanted to ask you about is guns can be a great investment. And I know this. You can look up guns that have appreciated like crazy, and if you hold on to them for long enough, um, it's a thing you can make a profit off of. So if you were to go that route, what specific type of guns would you be looking for? And you may not know this, but like, what's the average length of time you'd want to hold on to these guns before you thought, okay, now it's time to sell it?
Yeah, it honestly just depends. One, how much you have to invest in the
hmm
gun, and the market. The market's obviously going to dictate how much that gun appreciates, and the, like, I used to collect Mosin Nagants, because at the time, back in 2013, 14, you could buy them for about $100. If you found a really good deal, 89, 99 bucks, I think. I bought my first one for $99. And, they're cool, simple guns from World War II. So they come with some history, and they're they're basic, good for shooting, stuff like that. And at the time, you could find a bunch of surplus ammo and stuff like that. So that's good for somebody that is new, like with me, and but still wants to get into collecting. So if you don't have a lot of money to spend, on the higher end guns, like um, America's most popular rifle really is the M1 Garand that was used in the war too.
Hmm.
But those, I mean, especially now, I mean, they cost, you could spend anywhere from $1,000 to, depending on the what grade it is, stuff like that. You can spend thousands of dollars on it. um so it just depends on your budget, and the market really. So back then when I started buying a bunch of these because I'm like, cool. I would clean them up, store them, and I bought a crate, and I thought it was cool, just 'cause a bunch of cheap guns at the time. But then the market went crazy, like they dried up, and now you can't find one for under $400. So I mean, it's not a huge profit, but it's still, you buy a 900 or a $100 gun, they're going for a minimum of $400 now. I
Yeah,
mean, that's still
400% profit right there. I mean,
right.
that's
So,
crazy. So,
and it just depends. Before the pandemic, it was a little easier to get stuff, and the prices weren't as crazy. But now the
hmm,
prices are crazy because everybody just started buying up everything. So, um, it just depends. I mean, you could get into, like, double barrel shotguns can get crazy. It just depends on how much money you're willing to invest
hmm,
in. And um, like, I have a blue book of guns that you can look up the value of stuff, and it all depends on the condition. First of all, the condition and
hmm,
keeping it in good condition, and um, just certain manufacturers and the history and stuff like that. So um, it's
sure.
loaded question. It's hard to answer,
I
but
know. I knew it was going to be hard to answer. And the real reason I even asked is because, like, my father-in-law recently got into buying rare, hard to find whiskeys,
mhm,
and a lot of those have appreciated, significantly. And he's only had them for about a year, and so I'm like, a lot of people are looking for things that they can put a little money into, invest, and hold on to for a while, and then be able to sell later. And I feel like guns is definitely one of those things that you can do that with. And so I just was wondering your thoughts on that.
yeah, obviously the older the gun, the more it's gonna appreciate. So like,
Hmm.
and if you're new into collecting and stuff, the most popular thing to do is World War II military surplus, because you can still get them now. They come in and out of stock at different places. They're more than they used to be, but they're still you still find some on a low budget, and it's something that is not made anymore. And as people buy them up, the supply is getting lower. So, um, and then people customize them and do all this stuff. So if you can keep it stock and not, change a bunch of stuff on it, that gun will appreciate. Because before I got my, FFL, I had a curio and relics license, to where I could, if a gun was like older than 50 years, I could get it with that license, have it shipped to my house, kind of a thing, because it's a collector's item at that point. So
Okay.
the World War II era guns kind of really fit in that category. Obviously, anything um, before that as well, but um, usually World War II guns you can find um, at a reasonable rate, unless you go to like some of the oddball stuff. Like the M1 Grands, used to be able to find cheap, but now they're just getting more and more expensive. Um, those are cool. I mean, if you're getting a collecting, everybody's got to have one of those. I wish I had one of those. I had my hands on one and I sold it, and I kick myself every day for selling that. Um, but it's just, do some research and kind of see what, is within whatever your budget is and what you can get now, and it'll probably appreciate. Now, like stuff like if you go out and buy like a high point, that's never going to appreciate,
Mm.
ever. There's some, like with Glocks. I mean, there's some rare models that might, but generally your common stuff isn't going to appreciate as much. It's more of the older stuff with some history behind it.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think to close this thing off, you should I got in trouble for so long from him from calling it a clip instead of a magazine.
Oh
So
God.
you ought to explain that while I go show him what we're going to open up probably in maybe the third episode, maybe the fourth episode, but we're going to do a little tasting of this really quick.
All right. So the when people are referring to like magazines in pistols, they say, "Oh, it has a whatever clip." So they call the magazine in a pistol a clip. It is a magazine. If you call it a clip, you look like an idiot, especially in front of a bunch of people that know a lot about guns. It's called a magazine. Now, clips are different. There are clips, but those are usually in rifles. Like an M1 Garand uses a clip, and it's literally like usually a 5-round clip that the bullets you'll put it on, and then you'll stick it into the receiver on a clip. Whereas if you're putting bullets into a magazine, that's called a magazine. That's my biggest pet peeve is when people call.
Yeah, don't make that mistake.
Yeah.
He gets so mad when you, when
Yeah.
you call him the difference.
I'm like, don't
Because,
call it a clip.
you know, we hear all these movies and stuff and they call it a clip or
Joe Biden calls it a
whatever.
clip.
Yeah. And learning the difference. I mean, it makes sense when you're, you know, if you've ever played a World War II video game, the clip pings, you know, and they put a new clip in. It makes total sense. But
Yeah, you're literally gonna put the bullets on a little strip of metal. That's the clip. Most magazines nowadays are magazines. You put it in. So yeah, that's if make sure you know the difference between a clip and magazine and call it right. But yeah, this
okay, so this is what we're gonna. I don't know if we'll do it next episode or maybe the following episode, but
yeah, so I'm just now probably in the last year getting into whiskey,
Mhm.
kind of branching. I finally got to where I can drink it on the rocks.
Mhm.
So I had never heard of this brand,
Blanton's, yeah,
but you have, and
and they're hard to find. There's just one of those ones that I can't remember the technical term, but essentially they only distribute a certain amount to each liquor store. It's one of those things it's you know the retail price isn't crazy. It's just really hard to find. But my father-in-law, I wanted to get it for Keith for his birthday. My father-in-law happened to have one, so he's like, "All right, I'll sell it to you for what I bought it for." So I said, "Cool, all right." And
yeah,
so we're gonna crack it open and try it out and see what we think.
yeah, we might do it on a next podcast and see how it tastes.
See how it goes.
Yeah, I'm interested because you like you said, if you buy it in because this is from what Kentucky.
Yeah, it's from Kentucky.
So if you buy it in Kentucky, it's a normal price.
Yeah.
Versus like if you because like they release it and people go and buy it and jack up
Mhm.
the price.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea about this whiskey, so I'm kind of excited to try it.
Yeah, so typically, I mean, they're supposed to when they distribute it to these liquor stores, but they only will give them, you know, anywhere from like 2 to 8 bottles or whatever. And they expect that liquor store to respect the MSRP on it and sell what it's meant to be sold for. Well, people will go in, buy as many as they can, and then when it runs short again and they're hard to come by, they'll go sell it online and jack up the price 400 or 500%. So it is a very good bourbon, but it's just more hard to find than anything. So we're gonna check it out and see how it tastes.
Yeah, I saw. I googled it when you brought it over, and it like if you actually get on their website, they have all. I guess people collect like the tops of them,
Mhm,
and then like
mhm,
there's something like a letter on each one that actually
mhm.
ends up spelling out Blanton's. So they actually sell like these like sets that you actually put these caps and stuff on to collect. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I can't find it. My wife said this one had the T on it, but it's it's put like this, so you can put them, and it ends up making like a horseshoe. But the whole thing ends up being the bottle with the Blanton's on it. Ends up looking really cool.
It's pretty cool.
So, anyways, I thought that'd be a cool little fun thing that we'll try on the next podcast, and
Heck yeah.
I was glad we were able to get through this one. As
Yeah. Yeah, this one went a little bit longer than we were planning on, but
right,
you
but
know, there's obviously we didn't hit all the questions that new gun owners have, but we hit some of the, especially
I
the
feel
ones
like
that you
we hit
had.
some very important ones, and
Yeah,
especially for someone who's really never shot a gun before. I feel like this is I feel like we touched on a lot of
hmm
good areas that people can get, lean on and gain from. So
Yeah, yeah. And if you're watching us on YouTube and found any of this information helpful, think about consider subscribing because we're gonna be doing more videos on this stuff, and obviously we do the
mhm,
breakdown and cleaning videos. So that helps a lot of people, and that's how I've learned. Honestly, I learned a lot about guns on YouTube,
mhm,
and that's what most people do. They're a little more strict with guns now, so you can't do as much with them as you used to. Like you used to be able to, you know, when I was learning how to build ARs, find tons of videos out there on how to build ARs,
mhm,
but now they're super strict on what type of gun stuff you can do on there, which
mhm,
stinks because people need to learn this stuff. But
mhm.
um, yeah, they're very strict with firearms on there. So, but we'll do educational videos
Yeah,
for entertainment purposes
educational
only,
cleaning,
right?
and if it comes down to an AR and we have to make it a two-parter, one's to how to do one part of the AR and the other's how to do the other part, and you just have to put it in your mind how to do it together because
Yeah,
they won't let us do it on YouTube. I mean, you got to do what you got to do, but really though, if you hit that subscribe button on the YouTube channel, all that does is allow us to put out more information for you guys. So
right, right. So awesome. Well, it was a nice podcast. So we will see you guys on the next one, and thanks for joining.
appreciate it.